All right, here's my video on anatomical directions, directional terms, and anatomical plans and movements. So first, I want to start out with anatomical positions. The anatomical position, which is the 0 degrees position, this is the basic starting position for any directional term or any movement. The anatomical in the anatomical position, you face forward, arms at the side, palms facing forward, and feet facing forward. And this is the, like I said, this is the starting point for any movement that you want to do. And with directional terms, the first two terms are superior and inferior. The term superior means toward the head or upper or above. And inferior means toward the feet, lower or below. So an example of superior and inferior directional terms would be, an example would be the heart being located superior to the small intestine, or the small intestine is located inferior to the heart. And most directional terms are opposites, like superior and inferior are opposites. One is upper, one is lower. Um, Next, we have anterior and posterior. Anterior is further to the front or in front of, and posterior is further to the back or in the back of. In front and back. Anterior is the front, posterior is the back. An example of anterior and posterior is the sternum is anterior to the heart, so the heart would be posterior to the sternum. Then the next set of terms is medial and lateral. Medial means towards the midline of the body, and lateral means towards the side of the body, or you could say left and right. Or an example of medial and lateral is the heart lies medial to the lungs, and the lungs lie lateral to the heart. Next, we got proximal and distal. Proximal is closer to the axial body, and distal is further from the axial body. And the axial body equals the head, neck, and trunk. And the appendicular body is basically the limbs, your legs and your arms. So an example of proximal and distal would be the thigh is proximal to the foot, or the foot is distal to the thigh. So that's proximal and distal. Next would be superficial and deep. Superficial means closer to the surface of the body, and deep means further from the surface of the body. And a perfect example of superficial and deep, it would be the sternum is superficial to the lungs, and the lungs are deep to the sternum. So those are just some terms that can be used when speaking about directions, anatomical directions, which we have superficial and deep, proximal and distal, medial and lateral, anterior and posterior, and we have superior and inferior. So those are just some directional terms anatomical directional terms. So now I want to get into some anatomical planes and movements. Uh, these planes are basically imaginary planes, but they're two-dimensional planes that we have amongst our bodies. That certain movements occur in these planes, and so let's get into the first one is a sagittal plane, and a sagittal plane is a plane that splits the body into a left and right side with a midline down the middle of the body. So basically, the sagittal plane splits the body in half, gives it a left and right, and the movements that occur in this plane are the flexion, which is your arms in the air, extended in the air. Extension is your arms to the side. Hyperextension is your arms to the side, but hyperly extended to the back. The dorsal flexion is with your base of your foot planted on the ground with your toes in the air, and the plantar flexion is your toes on the ground with your foot, the heel of your foot in the air. And the next plane is the frontal plane. The frontal plane splits the body into a front and back, starting from the top of the head all the way down to the feet, splitting the body into a front and back. So the frontal plane, it gives you a front and back, like anterior and posterior, and a lot of movements that include abduction, adduction, lateral flexion, elevation, depression of the shoulder blades, elevation and depression of the shoulder blades, eversion and inversion. Those are some of the movements that go along with the movements that take place in the frontal plane, so, which is your front and back. And lastly, we got the last plane is the transverse plane. Basically, the transverse plane splits the body into a upper half and a lower half. And the movements that included in the transverse plane are medial rotation, lateral rotation, pronation, subnation, horizontal adduction, and horizontal abduction. So yeah, this is my video on anatomical planes and movements and anatomical directional terms.